Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Thanks for being with me. Today I have a very strange story for you. We talk about disappearances from time to time here on Dark Hearts, and as you well know, some vanishings are more unusual than others. And then there are vanishings like the one we are talking about today, in a category of their own. One night, a young Texas student took off all his clothes and vanished into the freezing cold air of the countryside. Right off the bat, the circumstances were strange, but the more investigators looked into this disappearance, the more baffling it became. In fact, one of the main cops on this case recently told the media, "The deeper you go, the stranger it gets." This is the story of the search for Jason Landry, the meteor shower disappearance. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps a lot. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Jason Landry was a 21-year-old student at Texas State University in San Marcos. Born and raised in Missouri City, Texas, he was a driven young man eager to return home for the Christmas break in December of 2020. Jason had no criminal history, no signs of ongoing personal conflict, just a busy college life and a homecoming ahead. Around 10:55 p.m., Jason left his San Marcos apartment with plans to travel about 60 miles south to Missouri City. At 11:05 p.m., he accessed Waze while driving along Highway 80, eventually crossing into Caldwell County moments later. I'm always surprised more people don't use Waze. It's like Google Maps, but I think better in a lot of areas of the country. It's a GPS, but it also shows you details of traffic jams, cops in the area. It's an app. And that's what Jason Landry was using to help him find his way back to Missouri City. He lived there, he was familiar with the area, but he had still put his coordinates into Waze. His phone last pinged Waze at 11:26 p.m. in Luling, Texas, at the intersection of Magnolia Avenue and Austin Street. Then he appears to have driven straight past the turn onto I-10, veering instead down Austin Street, which becomes Salt Flat Road. Because Jason was using Waze, his movements were later very easy to track, and the cops had no difficulty in pinpointing his movements. So Jason is now very much in the middle of nowhere. His wheels were crushing the gravel under the tires, dust was rising behind his car as he drove, and then it was just silent. Sometime before 12:30 a.m., Jason's Nissan Altima was found crashed and abandoned on the 2300 block of Salt Flat Road. The lights were left on, the car was locked, but Jason was nowhere to be found. It was late at night, but not that late, just after midnight. People were still moving around in the area, and it was near Christmas break, so college students were already out partying and celebrating being finished with their tests. So why didn't anyone hear this car crash? Why didn't anyone see it? And why didn't anyone see Jason Landry after he got out of his wrecked car and then vanished into thin air? Nearby the Nissan were Jason's clothes, phone, watch, and backpack scattered across the roadside. Some pieces were nearly 900 feet apart. Witnesses confirmed via Snapchat that the items belonged to him. Jason had been Snapchatting his friends throughout the evening. So this immediately appeared as though Jason had gotten out of his car after crashing it and started taking off his clothes and then his watch. He dropped his phone, he dropped his backpack, and he left this little trail of personal items in the road as he walked away from his crashed car. Very strange behavior. And before we go any further into the story, we need to talk about the socks. Before Jason Landry wrecked his car that night, he was thinking about socks, but not just any socks. He was thinking about a colorful pair of socks that had an image of a monkey in a suit and a tie, holding a briefcase in one hand and a banana in the other. On the socks is stitched the words "monkey business." Before getting into his car to drive to Missouri City, Jason Landry sent a very detailed bullet point list of things he wanted for Christmas, things he wanted his family to buy for him. On that list, Jason specified that he wanted wacky or cool socks, not basic ones with tacos or dogs on them. And he sent this very specific photo of the socks he wanted, the socks with the monkey on them, to his mother. His mother thought this was a bit odd because Jason was not a list maker. He was not a hyper-organized type A personality. He was more like a lovable goofball. His siblings were regimented and rule-oriented, but Jason was all about having a good time. Jason hated rules and he hated planning. So yes, his mother thought it was a bit odd that her son had sent her this very specific Christmas list request, and he'd never done anything like that before. Jason stood just over 6 feet tall. He has olive skin and light brown hair. Not long after starting college at Sam Houston State, he really began to embrace his inner slacker. He traded his button-down shirts for his tie-dye and hoodies. And Jason didn't have much interest in classwork. He eventually transferred to Texas State University, where his grades improved, and this brought relief to his parents. They thought perhaps he'd finally found his way. And then the pandemic hit. For someone like Jason, a pure extrovert, the pandemic was like a death sentence. I have always really felt for people like this. For me, the hardest part about COVID was the distance it caused between my grandbabies for a while. We spent a lot of time on FaceTime and Zoom, but I loved staying home. For Jason Landry, it was torture. He was stuck in a small apartment on an empty floor of a dormitory. It was like he was in solitary confinement. And Jason started to drink and smoke a lot of pot. By the summer of 2020, Jason Landry was not doing well. He was posting on social media a lot of shots of marijuana buds, and he was waxing philosophic about getting his life together. He talked a lot about wanting to get on the right track. But like millions of others, Jason was having a very difficult time surviving the isolation of the pandemic. In the weeks before Jason disappeared, he purchased a particularly potent strain of pot and was smoking a lot. He told a friend of his that with the help of the drugs, he'd found God and truly seen him for the first time ever. Jason's friends started to get a bit concerned about him. They think he wasn't eating or sleeping much. And at one point, Jason even admitted that he preferred not to eat because it affected the potency of the pot. One of Jason's friends, a student named Jack Frank, who had known Jason since 7th grade, started to become more than a bit concerned. He would later say, "It seemed more and more apparent that our conversations weren't making sense anymore. Jason would talk about the rapture coming, aliens, Jesus, Elon Musk, and all those things he would somehow tie together." This was really the time of the kind of right-wing to New Age pipeline or New Age to right-wing pipeline. It's something that for some is an interest, but for others led to the destruction of their families and friend relationships. I think in the coming years, we are going to see a lot of study and documentation on post-pandemic conspiracy theories. I don't think we currently have any understanding of just how many people we lost, like mentally, how many lost their way just because the pandemic was so mentally stressful. It was a very stressful time, especially for people who either had health problems or, were pregnant or elderly. And I don't think we fully understand the scope of how it changed some people. Jason Landry developed an interest in mysticism and started watching films like DMT, The Spirit Molecule, over and over. He told a friend of his that he wanted to be a monk and reach spiritual enlightenment, that he wanted to delve deeper into psychedelics and near-death experiences. This was totally out of character for Jason. Jason once messaged a friend of his on Instagram and said, "Maybe I'll turn into a stone statue and achieve nirvana or something." He began pushing his body to extremes. He was losing weight and using a lot of drugs. But for the most part, he was still lucid. Jason's friend Lisa would later say that the Saturday before he disappeared, he was talking about the upcoming semester. He was talking and seemed like his old self. The next night, Jason spent 45 minutes talking to a different friend on FaceTime, and he was alert and chatty with this friend as well. He rolled a joint and told his friend he'd been doing pull-ups in his bedroom. He looked sweaty and definitely stoned, but this friend said otherwise he was himself. And that's when Jason decided to leave his apartment and drive home. He packed a bag of toiletries, his PlayStation, his laptop, a handful of joints hidden in a small pill container, and then he took his Siamese fighting fish, Sparky, and put him in a plastic cup with a lid on it that he used as a pet carrier. Jason walked out into the freezing December night wearing nothing but a t-shirt, shorts, and sandals. He was also wearing a pair of socks with SpongeBob on them. He threw his hurriedly packed belongings into his 2003 Nissan Altima, programmed his Waze app to guide him to Missouri City, and he began to drive. The 165-mile trip should have taken a little over 2.5 hours. Instead, within just 10 minutes of leaving, Jason had crossed into Caldwell County via Texas Highway 80 and was driving through a small oil and ranching community. He started FaceTiming an ex-girlfriend of his, and then he sent a couple of Snapchats, like I said. Jason, who worked at Jimmy John's, had taken the next little while off so he could head home for the holidays. He was in good spirits, and he was looking forward to seeing his friends and family. The sky was clear, there was no moon, but that night there was a meteor shower, and it lit the Texas sky up brilliantly, even more so because there was no moon. Apparently it was spectacular. There's no knowing whether or not Jason saw the meteor shower, but many believe that as he drove, he looked up and saw the flashes of light and trailing meteors falling through the black night sky. And they believe he was distracted by the magnificent event, that he crashed his car while he wasn't paying attention. There are other theories about the meteor shower as well. What we do know is that at exactly 11:24 p.m., Jason Landry stopped using Waze. He should have turned right on Magnolia Avenue, but instead he went straight. No one knows where he was heading. At 11:28 p.m., he sent his girlfriend a final Snapchat. It was a selfie. Jason was sitting in the car looking calm and smiling slightly. After that, he vanished and was never seen again. As soon as Jason's car was located and people realized he wasn't in it, he was reported missing. The clothing found trailing along the road made the case more baffling. Immediate efforts included line searches, dogs, drones, mounted units, infrared scans, and even drained ponds. Over 50 square miles were combed, yet no trace of Jason was found. And this is very strange because of the terrain. We're going to get into that. Very quickly after the car crash, the search began. Jason had not had time to get very far. They searched for a week and then a month. And then in February of 2022, at the request of local authorities, the Texas Attorney General's Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit took over this case. They conducted extensive forensic searches, issued geofence warrants, interviewed dozens of witnesses, and hosted a 2023 expert review panel with state and federal agencies, including the FBI and Texas Rangers. Despite this, investigators concluded there is no sign of another vehicle, there is no sign that Jason met anyone, and there is no sign he was picked up. The prevailing theory is this was a single vehicle accident and the scene yielded no evidence of foul play. Now, it's not uncommon for people to ditch their vehicles along Salt Flat Road, apparently. Drunks, thieves, joyriders, and meth heads often head down the 7-mile stretch to evade the police. But what was Jason doing there that night? One investigator says it makes for an eerie place to visit at night. The only sounds are the haunting whines of the rusty pump jacks working in nearby oil fields. It's very, very quiet. Once in a while, an abandoned vehicle will come into view. Somebody has dumped a car on the side of the road. In fact, when Jason's Altima was first spotted, nobody paid much attention to it. There was significant damage to the body of the car and the rear window was shattered. They're still not sure what he crashed into. That's part of what makes this so strange. The engine was off, but the keys were still in the ignition, and like I said, the headlights were still on. Firefighters arrived around 1:15 a.m. at the crash site. That's like 45 minutes. And they theorized that the driver, Jason, had exited the vehicle through the back window before leaving the scene. But investigators would later conclude that Jason exited by squeezing through the driver's side door, which was damaged, and inches away from a barbed wire fence. Even that night, one of the cops remembers thinking, probably some drunk college kid. But even then, what the hell was he doing down this road? Finding Jason's belongings strewn about was what really caught the cop's eye. Sparky, the fish, was already dead. It looked as if Jason had placed the plastic tumbler on the ground to ensure it wouldn't get tipped over, but the fish had most likely frozen to death. And it wasn't just the fact that the clothes were on the ground, it's the way they were left. There was a faded camp t-shirt from Camp Choye, where Jason worked as a Christian counselor. It was laid out neatly and facing upwards, and then Jason had neatly laid his wristwatch on top of the shirt. His black Nike shorts and gray underwear were neatly laid out. So yes, that means that Jason was naked. The underwear had blood on them, blood from the crash. The cops and firefighters at the scene were truly confused. Why would this kid crash his car in the middle of nowhere, strip naked, lay his fish out, and then take off barefoot? Jason's parents, Lisa and Kent Landry, were informed that Jason's car had been found and that there were narcotics in his backpack. They were told that Jason had disappeared. Lisa and Kent said to the police, "What should we do besides pray?" Kent Landry got into his car and began to search for his son. He packed blankets and warm clothes in case he found Jason. When Kent got to the crash site, he was angry to see that there was no crime scene tape and no cops at the site. They'd already gone home. And then Kent saw the yellow and light blue SpongeBob socks that Jason loved. Kent found Jason's cell phone. The cops had left all of these items behind. They figured this was someone on drugs, and they weren't doing much to find the missing student. There were the attempts to locate Jason later on that I mentioned earlier, and the police did go to his apartment for a welfare check. They brought in the dogs and searched nearby abandoned wells and mine shafts. So even though at the beginning the cops were kind of like, well, this is a one-car crash, we're going home for the evening, they had still looked around the area and they could not find Jason anywhere. In 45 minutes, he really couldn't have gone anywhere. The cops say they drove around the area a couple of miles, nobody saw him. Then later on, when Jason never reappeared, they started to take it more seriously. Eventually, more than 31,000 acres were searched. And as one day turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into a week, it became more and more of a mystery. There were no tire tracks leading up to the scene of the car wreck. It did not appear that Jason had been taken or that he had gotten into a car with someone else. And remember, he was naked. It wasn't like someone was going to stop and pick up a naked guy walking along a desolate road in the middle of the Texas desert. The car had been located very quickly after Jason crashed it. Within about 45 minutes to an hour, he, like I said, did not have time to go anywhere. The most he could have walked was a couple of miles, and the cops drove around for farther than that. By the next morning, when they had brought in search efforts and drones, there's no question he would have been located by a drone or a helicopter or an investigator in a car or a volunteer on a side-by-side or a four-wheeler. He just hadn't had time to get that far away. And this is where the type of terrain comes into play. This is flat Texas desert. If you're in an isolated area here in Utah, you can be gone, disappeared. No one can ever find you in 10 minutes. There are mountains and valleys and caves and rock overhangs and bushes and trees. This is the flat Texas desert. Not a hill, not a mountain, not a rock formation, just flat Texas desert. Let's say he walked all night. They still would have spotted him the next morning with a helicopter or a drone. Authorities searched the entire area over and over for days. Jason Landry was not found. It didn't make any sense to the cops who knew this area well. This is not an area with anywhere to hide. If you haven't been to the deserts of Texas, when I say flat, I mean they're completely flat. You can see for miles and miles. There's nowhere to hide. It would be easy to spot someone in this area, especially from a helicopter. But despite hundreds of volunteers and man-hours, no one could find Jason Landry. We talk a lot about people who vanish and aren't found, but this one is truly strange. I've seen photos of this area. This guy could not have gotten away without being seen by the searchers, who were called in 45 minutes to an hour after he wrecked his car. There is an area with a lot of trees around it near the San Marcos River, but that's not where Jason was. The longer this search went on, the more baffling the disappearance became. Searchers were sent out day after day. Here you can see volunteers going through the countryside near Lowling. 2 days after Jason disappeared, searchers focused on a small pond about 1,000 yards from the crash. Dogs and divers were sent in. Jason was not found. Later on, a drone spotted something, but it turned out to be a group of turtles. Rescuers began to speak in whispers. They knew it would just be a matter of time. Jason's body would either turn up, maybe he had drowned, or maybe he'd even frozen to death. Perhaps he'd overdosed. But Jason Landry did not turn up. His body was not found. They even drained the pond near his disappearance, and that took days. Jason was not in the pond after they drained it. When I was researching this story, I must have read 5 or 10 quotes that all said the same thing. This just doesn't make sense. Where could he have gone, and why hadn't his body turned up? A month became 2. People began to talk about the theories surrounding Jason's disappearance. So let's go over those. The first is hypothermia, or a fatal crash. Caldwell County officials, led by Captain Jeff Ferry, suggest that Jason may have crashed, stripped off his clothes, which is the phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing, wandered into the night and succumbed to hypothermia, possibly with scavenger animals such as wild hogs destroying his remains. Most people say that would take time, and they would most likely find at least part of him. The second theory is foul play, or a staged scene. A former FBI agent and PI, Abel Pena, disagrees with the official narrative. He suspects it is possible that Jason encountered someone before making the wrong turn, or perhaps he was not even driving the car. Pena forwarded a list of 10 individuals to local prosecutors who might hold key information. That list has not been released. The third theory is a stage-it-yourself disappearance theory. Some Reddit sleuths argue that the crash scene may have been staged. They note the clothing, the backpack, and watch left scattered. Maybe Jason departed voluntarily, leaving misleading clues behind. There's one theory that this just might have been an accident and inattention, that perhaps Jason became disoriented, crashed, and then accidentally wandered into the brush. As the search went on, something even more unusual began to happen when searchers brought in some of Jason's personal belongings for the dogs to smell. Over time, searchers began to suspect that something was interfering with the search. They were encountering a chemical phenomenon beyond the dog's ability to process scent information. The dogs were acting confused. Some of them actually developed physical symptoms. So a scientist was brought in to try and assist, or to find out what was causing the dog's inability to locate any type of scent in that area. Jason's t-shirts were of no help, and the dogs were not obeying the commands they would normally obey. They weren't able to do their job in their usual fashion. The scientists brought in said that the research is not conclusive on this, but there are studies that suggest something in the oil production process, when mixed with water, creates an illusion of human decomposition. So with these oil wells in the groundwater, perhaps this scent is being generated and the dogs are confused, thinking they smell something like human decomposition, but it's really a byproduct of oil production mixed with water. There were some scientific details in that theory, but it didn't make any sense to me. You know, your girl is not the science and math girl. But this is just another unusual and strange element to this story. After 9 days initially, the search was suspended. The Landrys were left to ponder the questions remaining. Why hasn't Jason been found? Why hasn't his body been found? How had he evaded so many searchers, their drones, their dogs? Kent Landry gave an interview and he made a very, very good point in it. He said, it's weird when you compare Jason's case to Gabby Petito. He said they literally searched entire states and found Gabby Petito in some of the most inhospitable terrain around, and we can't find Jason in a cow pasture outside Lowling, Texas. That is the perfect way to put this. Perfect. It's a cow pasture. There is nowhere for this guy to have gone. And they were looking for him so quickly that he would have been found within a couple of hours. But he hasn't been. It's worth mentioning that 6 months before Jason went missing, 2 teenaged boys were murdered several miles from where Jason's car was found. Their killer, Brian Haynes, would later tell investigators that he was being hunted by aliens who were chasing him and that he had to shoot the boys in the head so the aliens wouldn't get them. Oh my goodness, we live among loons. It's also known that meth is made in this area, although it doesn't appear Jason was taking that substance. By February of 2021, this story had made its way to true crime groups on social media. Crime Junkie then did an episode where the hosts talk about the strange phenomenon of young men going missing from their cars, and they talked about Jason in that episode. Well, that sent the conspiracy theorists down a rabbit hole, talking about Jason being abducted by aliens, by drug runners, by serial killing hillbillies. But a well-known criminologist became involved in the case and thinks that Jason's disappearance is something much less sensational. There is a good chance that Jason Landry froze to death. He was naked and it was bitterly cold. But even that more mundane and likely explanation does not offer any sort of clue as to where Jason Landry's body is. If he froze to death, why hasn't he been found? To this day, an army of online sleuths regularly discusses this strange and unsettling disappearance, and we are no closer to answers than we were almost 5 years ago. The case remains active and ongoing, with the Texas AG's unit reaffirming its commitment to encourage the public to submit credible tips. No suspects have been officially identified. The PI, Peña's list of persons of interest, has not yielded public details. Investigators have not ruled out someone else driving the car or a run-in near the intersection leading to the detour. The Landry family, backed by volunteer search teams, continues to hold annual vigils at the crash site and reject the notion of case closed. Jason's scattered clothes and abandoned backpack have become mythic markers of a man who vanished into the night. Was it an accident, a dark encounter at a remote intersection, or a deliberate vanishing act? Over time, larger forces joined. A former FBI agent turned family advocate, local podcasters, geofence petitions, and a coordinated cold case unit have all helped. Yet no smoking gun emerges. In the off chance that you have any information about this, please consider reaching out to the Texas AG Cold Case Unit or Project Absentis, both of which remain open to tips and leads. It would be nice if Jason's family could get some answers on this baffling disappearance. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. This is my podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, and I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. Don't forget about our fundraiser. We raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage. We are trying to help solve some cold crimes. You can watch that video on the playlist on my channel, simply entitled Fundraisers, and it will tell you how you can donate $5, $10, whatever you want. I appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for being part of this amazing community. I'm so proud of what we're building here. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.